Hey guys, it is Angie and I'm really excited for this video because today I'm going to show you guys how to study the Bible. I did YWAM Boston Disciple Bible School. It is a 4-month-long program where 3 months we read the entire Bible, and then on the 4th month we went to Italy to put into practice what we learned. So we led Bible studies, we did teachings, and we just served and loved on people. But now that I am back home, I am now just wanting to help people to get closer to God, and everything I learned with YWAM Boston, I want to help other people too. So this is what this video is about, and I'm really excited to show you guys how to actually study the Bible, and it's actually really fun. So let's get started. So the very first thing before reading the Bible is praying. Prayer is powerful, and when we pray before we read, we allow the Holy Spirit to open our hearts so we can receive and get crazy revelations. So that is super important. Pray before you read. Ask the Lord for guidance. Ask the Lord of what to read. Ask the Lord to just clear your mind, to focus, and it's just like really powerful, you know? So that is the very first step when you're reading the Bible. Now, before I show you guys practical ways on how to study the Bible, I'm going to show you guys what you guys need to read the Bible. So the very first thing you need is a Bible. There are many types of versions. There's NLT, NIV, ESV. They all say the exact same thing, just different versions. NLT is more easy, word to word. It's super easy to understand. There is New King James Version, which is more of Old English, of thou shalt not, or, language like that. But what I read is ESV. Now, when you're looking for a Bible, you want to see what version is best for you. There are some versions that might be hard to understand for you, and there might be some that will work for you. If you are a beginner to reading the Bible and you really want something super simple, I would go for NLT, because NLT is word for word and it's super easy to understand. But for me, I have the ESV Study Bible. This Bible is the best Bible I've ever owned. It is so amazing. And one thing I really suggest when you guys are looking for a Bible is not just to get a regular Bible, but to get a study Bible. Study Bibles are very, very, very cool, where it's not just giving you verses, but in the very bottom of the Bible, it gives you a little context of what you're reading. And the cool thing about this Bible is not only there's words, there's also pictures of what you're reading, maps, and it's just really cool. They also give you a little introduction of what you're reading, and it just helps so much when you're reading the Bible. Now, this one is an ESV version, which I will leave in the description below for you guys to buy one. But if you are not an ESV reader, there is also a NIV, Culture Background Study Bible. This Bible I use during my Disciple Bible School, and it has helped me so much. This one does have more photos, which has colored photos. Not only does it give you maps, but it also gives you like actual pictures of things that has been in the Bible. So both of these Bibles I will leave in the description. There are also many more Bibles, but these are just the two that I own and that I have used. But I totally recommend these, and these are just really amazing and really, really good. Now, if you guys do want to go a little more deeper into your study Bibles, or if you are a visual or like paper or just physical things, I would totally recommend getting the Bible studies. There is a Old Testament and the New Testament where you get to study the Bible. It is every single book of the Bible in these two thin books, but you can study so much in these, and they're really fun. And they're just also so aesthetically pleasing. They're super nice, and they just ask questions of you trying to find the answers, and there's also little details of what you're reading when you're studying the Bible. Now, the next thing you will be needing are 5 highlighters, different colors. Colors don't matter, just get whatever you want. You also need a pen. And also, I made a little PDF for you guys that you guys can print out or have in your phone of color coding and some information on how to study the Bible. I also use 2 apps. The very first app I use is called Filament app, which is super amazing for you to study the Bible, but also the Bible Hub app, which is an amazing, super easy to understand app where you can learn the historical background of what you're reading. So now that we have all of our things, now I'm going to be showing you guys a step-by-step on how to study the Bible and how to use these highlighters and this paper. So for this example, we are going to be reading off the book of Matthew 2. A little pro tip: when you're studying the Bible and you just don't know where to start, pray. Ask God, what book should I read? And the Lord will tell you where to read. So when you're reading the Bible, stick with one book, but when you're learning about the historical context, reading other verses and other stories from the Old Testament will very much help you with what you're reading. So before we start, I want to show you guys my color coding method and what I use the highlighters for. So there are 5 things that I look for when I am reading the Bible. I really recommend for you guys to print this out because it is very helpful, and for visuals like me, this is very helpful. The very first thing when I'm reading the Bible is you're going to first get one highlighter, any color, and you're going to use this highlighter to underline things that just stand out to you. So when you're reading the Bible, say you're reading Matthew 2, you're going to use the color of your choice to just underline things that stand out to you, that just blew your mind away, or just whatever. Now for your second highlighter of any color of your choice is the historical background. Now for this color, when you are reading the Bible, and again for this example Matthew 2, when you're reading the Bible and you're kind of confused or you want to study more historical context of what you're reading, you're going to underline it to then after you're done reading, you can go back and study it. For historical context, I like to use the app Bible Hub, which I'll show you guys how to use it in a moment. But this is a very amazing app for you to study that is reliable and nothing false, but all biblical truth. Now for the third highlighter is God's redemptive plan. This one is just super cool to highlight, especially when you're reading the Old Testament, which God's redemptive plan is basically just talking about the coming Messiah. So if you guys don't know, the Old Testament really foreshadows about a coming Messiah, aka Jesus, which is then fulfilled in the New Testament, where Jesus comes down on earth to save us. And a really good example of God's redemptive plan is in Isaiah 53:3. He was despised and rejected by man, a man of sorrow and acquainted with grief. And as one from whom men hid their face, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Which is crazy that a prophet from the Old Testament who has never in person seen Jesus is talking about a coming Messiah. So Isaiah 53:3 is a really good example for you to underline of God's redemptive plan about him coming down to earth to save the world. You can also use this not just to underline prophet words, but also people in the Bible that are connected to the lineage of Jesus. So from Adam to Jesus, and a good example is Ruth and Boaz, which they came from the lineage of King David, which then later, through their lineage, Jesus is there. Now, the fourth highlighter is biblical action principles. So when you're reading the Bible, this is a really good way to underline of how I can apply this to my life. And a prime example is Mark 1:35, where it says, "In rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to desolated places, and there he prayed. So how I can apply this to my life is spend time with God before starting your day. And the very last one is God's character and nature. As you read through the Bible, you just underline God's character and his traits. An example is Psalms 103:8, where it just talks about how God is gracious. And so the God's character and nature is God is gracious. And you can just see throughout the entire Bible that God is a just God, a loving God, a gentle God, and so on. And it's just an amazing way to underline, to look at God's character throughout the entire Bible, that he stays the same in the Old Testament, but also in the New Testament. So now that you have color-coded all the things that you are going to use to underline, and you have already figured out what book you're going to read in the Bible, now I'm going to talk about what to do before you read the Bible. For this example, I'm going to be talking about the book of Matthew. There are 4 things that you want to look for before you read the book. So you want to first find who is the author, who is the original audience, why this book was written, and when was the date that it was written. So there are 2 things that you can use to find these answers, and the very first one is through a study Bible. For my Bible, it gives you a date, a little timeline of what thing happened in order, the author, the date, the purpose, some key things, and some outlines. But if you don't have a study Bible, you can also check out the Filament app, and this is how you use it. After you log in, this is how the app's going to look like. So you're going to press the home pages, and there are 3 things: study, reflect, and see. These are the apps that I like to use for the 4 questions of the who, why, and whens. So you're going to press study, and you're going to press where it says 2 Corinthians at the top, and you're going to look at the book that you want to study. For this example, Matthew, you can press any number. I usually doesn't matter. This also gives you some things that you can study on. So where it says study note, you're going to tap on it, put book overview. The very top one is quick facts, which is a very quick summary of all of this and all in few sentences. But if you want to go in depth, you can go through introduction, settings of like where it's taking place. It's also giving you a summary, the authorship of who wrote it. So for this example, the book of Matthew, the author is Matthew. The date that was written was in the late 50s or early 60s. Why this book was written was because to demonstrate that Jesus is the Messiah, that he has the right of throne of David as Israel's true king, and that he is ultimate fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham. And so also with the dates, it's super important to look at when the date of when this was written, because the Bible is not chronologically in order. It's not in order from date. So now that you know the original audience, the author, the date, and why this was written, now I'm going to show you how to color code when you are reading the Bible. We're going to just focus on Matthew 5:17 through 20. So this is the ESV version, and this is what it says. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does this and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that the scribes and Pharisees, you will never again enter the kingdom of heaven. So for this example, things that really stood out to me was verse 20, where it says, unless your righteousness exceeds that the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, as I was reading, there were some things that were a little confusing, or I just want to study more. It is also the same verse. Now, when you have this, what I like to do is just underline it below, and I'm going to look back at this so I can study it later. In this example, how God's redemptive plan is shown was actually in verse 17, where it says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but fulfill them. That Christ came not to abolish, but to fulfill the prophets from the Old Testament, like the book of Isaiah, showing that Jesus is a Messiah. Now I look of how can I apply this to my life? And the one that really stood out to me was, therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least these commands and teaches others to do the same will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them, teaches them, will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Now, how I can apply this to my life is to teach others about Jesus, to help others to get closer to Jesus. And that's how I can apply it to my life. Now, I couldn't really find any of God's character and nature in that verse, but a really good example of God's character is in Matthew 15:32. It says, Then Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion on the crowd because they have been with me now for 3 days and had nothing to eat. Now, in this example, God is very compassionate. Okay, so now that I've shown you guys an example on how to underline, I'm going to show you guys how to study the historical background. So, what you're going to do is you're going to download the Bible Hub app. So when you get the app, this is how it's going to look. So now that you're open to the app, you are going to open the Bible, and this is how it's going to look like when you pop up. So when you want to study a specific verse, you are going to press the STU, which stands for study. And on the very top, you're going to press what book you want to study. And then right next to Matthew, you're going to look for the verse. And then you want to tap again to pick the verse you want. So it gives you the full verse, and then it goes small sentences per sentence. It also goes more in detail of each sentence. When you scroll down, you can look for person, place, and event of what you're reading as Jesus, who is a speaker. It also gives you teaching points, even Bible study questions that if you are leading a Bible study, these are really good questions to ask. And you can they also give really good connections on other scriptures that you can also study. Not only can you use this app to study, but you can also learn the Greek of what you're reading. If you scroll all the way to SUM, which is summary, it also gives you a summary of what you're reading of that chapter. So that is the end of the video, and I really hope that you guys learned a lot. I know it was a lot of talking, but trust me, the more constant you do this, the more easy you'll get, and the Lord's gonna work, and you get so deep in the Bible that it's so fun and so life-changing. So thank you guys so much for watching, and if you know anybody that wants to learn how to study the Bible, send them this video and it'd be really helpful. And I really encourage you to even do it with somebody if it's your first time, so you guys can learn together. So thanks for watching. Bye!